What's up, gamers? Barnes here. I'm here with Mr. Mike Panke, um, one of my players in several of my campaigns, and this is going to be a video about the basics of the Aeluqygwen. I had previously asked the community about their input, about revisiting a fond campaign setting that you had written, and coming back to it again to play into it again, and if they had any tips. And I'd gotten some great response videos. Um, Derek and Brady had some very interesting things to say, and one of the things they both said is to review what I was thinking when I uh, when I initially wrote it. Um, Mike Panke played the main character that turned out to be the main character in this campaign. Um, that went to most characters, I think, for 19th level. This was the biggest fizzle in fizzle history.
It pretty much happened in the middle of the hot minute.
Yeah, we had just 1 minute that everything in the campaign was leading up to, and then it just fizzled. Anyway, so I'll go over,
We literally talked about the hot minute for several months.
and then it happened. And in real life, two players fell out of favor of each other, so it kind of just froze the game at that moment.
It was tough. It was personal drama that was impossible to overcome due to the involvement of money.
I had nothing to do with it.
Me either.
Or any of the players that are playing with us now.
Happily.
But we're here to talk about the Aeluqygwen, the basics. So when I first started to write the Aeluqygwen, I was playing a D20 game that was a Frankenstein type game. My players referred to it as Pandora's Box, and it was pretty much just sci-fi in space. And they had
I wasn't in that.
he was not in that. They had become epic level, or near epic level, or virtually epic level, and destroyed a plane via magic and technology. Um, and while I was playing it was kind of how can I describe it? It was kind of like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy type of setting, and mixed with Star Wars and Dungeons and Dragons. And I was looking to play a
Everything good, really.
I was looking to play a more coherent, heavily role playing based game, and so in the D20 line. So I'm kind of up shit's creek to begin with because I'm looking for a D20 game that's heavy RP. But I hadn't played the D&D game yet in the 3rd edition or 3.5, but I had collected them because I've always played D&D as a kid, and so I decided I was going to this idea of this world. I was going to write this world based off the book Holy Blood and Holy Grail. I thought it'd be a really cool idea to be in a campaign where there was a lost or hidden god, or a god or a deity that was like forbidden by the other gods. And so I wanted to start playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I had some romanticized ideas about the book Holy Blood and Holy Grail coming into it. When I first started to write the world, I thought to myself, like, well, I want it to be really simple. Like, I want it to be as simple as I can because I know it's going to get complicated very quickly. And one of the ways
It did.
one of the ways I thought, to keep it simple was I used a dualist religion system, or deities, pantheon. And basically, I have these two bipolar gods who have a love affair. They're married, and they have a falling out. And when Mechanus is destroyed from the last campaign, they're giving birth to one of their children. And
how do they destroy it again?
Through magic and technology. Um, and so when they the baby, the divine being, is being born, Faz, the man, takes off, and he leaves with his I guess it's a squire, and they come to the prime material plane where Faz takes the baby. He takes the baby away from Malum, the girl, the mother, and they run to the prime material plane, and the baby, in doing so, in this weird time frame that gods live in, I'm guessing in my own mind, the baby merges with the prime material plane. Gonna need a little stretch of imagination for that one. But anyway, that's what happens. So the prime material plane becomes a becomes a living uh, god. Um, However, it's not yet conscious.
Resulting in a really cool looking map.
Thanks, Panke. Thank you. Um, and so Foz, the father, needs help raising the baby, and so he takes a mortal woman as his wife um, in order to raise the baby, and he settles down in the prime material with his son, the Urte, as it's now called, the prime material plane, and his mortal wife and their family, and they settle down. And then Malum finally escapes. Um, she escapes Mechanus, the destruction Mechanus, and or Mechanus, however you pronounce it, and she arrives on the prime material to find Foz has taken a mortal wife, and she's outraged. Um, her her nurse is with her, and the
And she has kittens.
she doesn't have any kittens. And then the clash of the hearts happens when Foz and Malum reignite, and everything's happy for a second, and then Malum realizes he's taken a new wife, and she loses it, and they actually have a war over over the child, basically. So that was how I wanted to. Those were the gods I wanted to present, and how I was going to make them bipolar. Foz is basically a good cavalier or paladin type character, and Malum is basically a anti-paladin or blackguard female character. Um, and in this campaign, I wanted alignments not to read exactly as they say they are. I wanted to reflect the need for human beings' survival to get along with one another. And by doing so, good isn't necessarily good all the time, but definitely a point of view or a perspective, and evil isn't always evil, but at least a point of view or a perspective. Um,
Which is kind of, I mean, to describe that in different words, I mean, the evil is definitely evil and the good is definitely good. The evil is like vilely evil. The good characters are like self-sacrificing to the extreme and, you know, exalted good. But at the same time, I guess that the good characters specifically I noticed are more like intractable and stubborn and one-minded about good, and also that the evil characters are more personalized, like the possibility of, you know, uh, peaceful interactions between evil characters, the idea of evil characters in love, you know, a less clearly defined spectrum of good and evil.
Basically, I wanted to present that everyone went evil for a reason, and everyone was good for a reason, and um, I wanted to show that like people do like evil things for the good sometimes, and people do good things for the worse of everything, for the bad sometimes. Um, and I wanted to reflect that in our world. I wanted to have that reflection from our world in the RPG. Um, and so the last religion that came about was in the middle, and it was the animists. And the animists worship spirits of ancestors, um, different powerful beings, mountains, rivers, forest, the land, um, and animists inadvertently were really worshiping the lost god. That they didn't realize they were worshiping the child, the plane itself.
Until I filled them in.
Well, his character at one point. Um, and the animists were aware of that it was a living world to an extent, and a mechanic organic to a certain extent. And uh, I also wanted to like reflect Arthurian tales, um, where people are directly connected to the land and like destined to rule, like picked by a god to rule this land, and you know, chosen beyond your choice, was, you know, a victim of circumstance, put in a spot to rule. Um,
Fated to be significant.
yeah, fated to be significant, exactly. Uh, a aspect I used to do this was I removed the ethereal plane and replaced it with the spirit world from Ghost Walk and Deities and Demigod. It's third edition. And I took out all the fluff and applied it to my world. Um, and basically, the spirit world is the living planes, the deity child. It's conscious. It's things of the past and present and future. Um, some things exist only in the spirit world. Some things exist in both the prime material plane and the spirit world. Those things tend to be living matter. Um, and through the spirit world, things are clearer. Um, you can see clearly like who's being influenced by a dark power or who's being influenced by a light power through the spirit world, unbeknownst to them even if you have the power to see the spirit world. Real quick side note, just to get this out there. Um, in this particular world, previously, the devils had won the blood war and enslaved the demons versus via true name magic. Some people are gonna have a problem with that. That's what happened in this game. um, so in this game, I took certain.
Oh, did you tell them about the gnomes?
We didn't get into the gnomes. No. This is the first video about the Aeluqygwen, and just basically what I was looking to do. I also wanted to include numerology into the game. So certain numbers that I felt had some kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Voodoo stigma about them, or were numbers supposedly in sacred, geometry, or
At the very least, that people would notice.
at very least, what people notice. So very simple ones were like the number 13 was reoccurring a lot. What else? 360.
The party was more or less convicted that the end of the world was supposed to happen
All right. So I wanted to
in a
use.
specific year.
I wanted to reflect the real world paranoia of 2012 prophecies. And so what I did was I had planned the campaign going on to their elder ages.
Which it did. We
Yeah.
were old.
And basically I started them in the year like 620 something. 624, 623, something like that. Around young adulthood. So by the time
So I guess we weren't that old, but we did take penalties.
right. So by the time 666 came around, which they actually never got to, which is the year that they suspected that for some reason an apocalyptic event was going to take event, and I wanted them to think that by
The
doing
pieces
that.
were definitely in place.
Well, I wanted them to think that, and that was something I wanted to relate over the wars that this nation had itself in earlier in the decade, and the whole paranoia of the 2012 prophecy. I also wanted to make religion a really big part of people's lives. Like I wanted it really to reflect like the Dark Ages, where people got their knowledge from, and their lives revolved around the church, at least in a section of European history. And I wanted to demonstrate the caste system and medieval laws, and also the time of the Inquisition. And I did that by several different ways. Like, for instance, you can't just own a weapon. You don't just walk around with a weapon with like no title to have a weapon. You gotta have a reason to have that weapon. You can't just pick up a weapon and walk down the street. Like being a rogue, someone's gonna be like, "What the hell are you doing with that weapon? Who are you?"
Where are you
Um,
going with that grappling hook?
yeah, so like things like that. People aren't allowed to look at certain nobles or royalty. You can't like even look them in the eye or stuff like that.
That came into play a few times because we had a noble in the party.
We did have a noble in the party, which is why I was always asking about a decent noble class because there ain't one. Um, is there any other examples you can think about how I like simulated medieval law?
Um, well, all of the examples that I was thinking of just now were all things that our characters tried to rebel against and
They did.
change once we had power.
So things like slavery, which is something that
We rebelled against the caste system specifically by getting rid of slavery, but also uh, we basically instated, equality in the lands that we ruled. There was freedom of religion. There was there were all kinds of things that were illegal in the country that our ducal area was in. Um, Mirrors were illegal,
years were illegal,
and other types of vanity products were also illegal. Makeup wasn't allowed, I think you said, and there were all kinds of
weird necrotic laws.
there were all kinds of other goods that were restricted, and we basically made all of those things legal.
So like the question of like slavery, which is something I said to them wouldn't even like probably occur through their characters' minds because it's kind of like playing out a character, but whatever. I ran with it. So
My argument at the time was that the character that I was playing was so intensely wise that his understanding of civil rights would be,
sure.
centuries beyond everyone else. So if he was in any position to do anything about it, sure, he would free the slaves. Why not? It's obviously the nice thing to do.
All right, so I wanted to illustrate the caste system. Not everybody had rights. Certain professions or classes were just outright illegal. Not to say you couldn't be them, but you're going to deal with being hunted, by somebody. And it's still playing that. We're still playing that now.
And almost every class necessarily has other classes that are inimical to them.
What does that mean?
Almost every class has other classes that are destined to be gunning for them if they happen to run into each other.
Yes, I'll get into that
Also
later.
based on alignment.
It's based on alignment. There's a lot of other factors how I limit class in the world. Back to the spirit world. The spirit world, I only have 3 planes that are available to the 3 outer planes. No, actually 2 outer planes. 2 outer planes that are available to the prime material. All the other planes have been closed by the gods. I'll get into that at another time. This is just introductory. But in the spirit world, the chosen race, it is the time of man when they were playing and are playing, and the spirit world, the Urte, the living god prime material, marks men, the chosen race. It marks the chosen race to show like possession that I made this, that I am conscious that I have made this, and that makes people destined to do something and to lead a land. And so in other words, some lands are directly connected to a family's bloodline of spirits. It changes over time, and even the lands change who they're connected to. New kingdoms pop up and disappear or whatever. But lands are connected to people directly via the spirit world. Panke had played Beal Bancraft last time, a druid. And the Aeluqygwen druids start with the spirit of man, and they're the only class that does start with the spirit of man, and you cannot be a druid unless you do have the spirit of man. Same thing goes with spirit shamans, and the like.
Which actually was my character class for most of the campaign.
And they druids also have the ability to see the spirit world. So playing with the spirit man, how do you feel like that affected the game in role playing or even mechanics versus other settings, perhaps?
It made plot hooks for my character more obvious and easy. Uh, you know, a lot of the
Come in.
times player characters will have the option to just kind of lay low or to try to go
Keep talking,
unnoticed,
Panke. Excuse me.
get out of the limelight, so to speak. And in the Aeluqygwen campaign, if you are put in the position to have the spirit of man, you don't really have the option to stay out of the limelight because everywhere you go, important people who have the ability to recognize it are going to see that you have it and seek to influence you in a variety of different ways depending on whatever their agendas happen to be. So, if Beal Bancroft, as a low-level character with a spirit of man, bumped into a dragon, he might be lucky because he might be less likely to be eaten by the dragon for that reason. On the other hand,
Dragons can see the spirit. Undead too.
on the other hand, if Beal Bancroft had
Right.
bumped into an evil wizard or an evil knight, then there'd be a fairly good chance that he would be taken prisoner and manipulated in some way.
Right. Right. Now the reason why people want to manipulate people with the spirit of man is because there's a vote going on between the gods, a contest, basically for an empty seat in the council of the gods. And
Humans are ignorant of this, by the way.
yeah, this is forbidden knowledge. There's a lot of forbidden knowledge in this campaign. And so the gods have decided that they're going to take the two candidates who just happen to be Faz and Malum, and they're going to put them in the prime material and close everything else off from the prime material except for their home planes, which happen to be heaven and hell. And there is no Mechanus because it's the prime material. And so this contest is for souls, and they're accumulating souls. However, if a soul of the Urte gets attention of the council or somehow escapes, then the gods will realize, the council of the gods will realize that there's other divine beings down on the Urte and that the vote isn't fair. You making faces? But we'll get into that another point. The world is flat. It's a disk. It revolves around its moon. Now I've made a few changes in the actual, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Astrology?
Cosmology.
It's got a game term, so I don't want to confuse anybody.
Oh, well, I thought that's what you meant.
That is what I meant, though. So initially there was 364 days, and every 90 days the planet, even though it's not a planet, the disk would do a flip, and it would create like this holiday, and the moon would wane or wax depending on the flip.
This results in the sun rising in a different spot every single day.
Yeah, the sun rises in a different spot every single day because it's going around the disk, and so it revolves around a different spot. I decided
And that means that some days it goes east-west and some days it goes north-south, depending on
Sure.
what time of year it is.
there is no east, west, north, south because it is a disk.
Right, that too.
Direction is told by a series of degrees from a point known on the disk. Different races and cultures have different ideas of where the center point of the disk is. The dragons know the true center point, which is at the heart, and the heart is where the spirit world, the material plane, and heaven and hell all kind of merge.
Spooky.
It's a little spooky. The veil's the thinnest there between valleys. So the disk has a sun that revolves around it. It revolves around its moon, and I've decided to change it to 360 days, just so I can make it easier, for, compare it to a circle. And the flip was kind of cumbersome to explain, so I was basically gonna do away with that. And instead, I'm gonna have the moon spin in the middle, and that would create waning and waxing in comparison to the flat surface like planet.
Although it'll never be crescent shaped.
I guess not. um, I was using a small moon. I think I'm going to continue to use the small moon. It hasn't actually come up in the pregame sessions. But there was 2 moons in the original setting. I think I'm going to keep them.
There was a brief discussion in the last campaign of trying to go to the moons, but we never went through it.
They never went through it. I've added a ring around the planet, like Saturn, you would say. And that basically helps the direction. We'll get into that more in the campaign. And I guess I'll do a geology vid. So some of the other feelings I had was about like when I was 12 years old, and when I was 12, we were playing D&D. We were playing like a Frankenstein D&D of everything that was available, and some third-party projects, you know, from Roll-Aids or. I was always a big fan of Bard games supplements. I always liked them. I thought they were cool. They had like the Scout class. I thought that was a cool class. I think they had the what else? Aeluqygwen and Alchemist and a couple other classes. Anyway, so we played a mixed match when I was 12, and it ended up there was a lot of people in this campaign, like as little kids, maybe a couple dozen, and we had revolving GMs, and I wanted it to be player versus player. And so I kind of set up like the factions almost that players would be somewhat at odds at each other. They wouldn't have to come to blows right away, but I wanted it to be at least that, like, hey, you know, if there's a problem player, other players are going to take care of that, bro. And so I wanted that to be a factor. I wanted the players to power game. That might sound really weird to some of you, but basically they're going to do it anyway. So I figured I might as well encourage it, and I'll present my theory on power GMing. Now, power GMing is when I make NPCs just as strong or stronger than the player characters. And
at times frustratingly so.
You think so?
Simply because you find ways to limit when your NPCs can be killed and when they can't.
I guess so. Sure.
Which is good for storytelling, but frustrating as a player character when you think that you have an NPC dead to rights.
Well, you know, it's funny because it's one of the things that like people say, like, you know, 3.5 or Pathfinder or 3.0. It's one of the things that kind of like hate about it is that it requires a lot of prep time, and I can see that because like going through and not just thinking, all right, well, I have this badass Cavalier type guy, like, you know, I could just kind of make up the stats on the fly. You can't really do that when you're encouraging your character players to power game so you can power GM. You know, I keep everything within the challenge rating system. I'm not a big fan of challenge rating, but whatever. I kind of have my own feel for it now, or at least over the last several years I have.
It works, kind
of. And so that was one of the concepts I wanted to have. I wanted the players to be on the other players' toes to keep them in mind. And I think it worked to some extent. How did you feel about it? Yeah.
About which specifically?
Player versus player.
Oh, well, my experience of the PvP situation as being my first D&D campaign probably made it unique. I found that as a player, the temptation that my character may have had to kill off other PCs was not shared by me as a player, because they're my friends and I like playing with them, and if they weren't playing, nobody would be playing, so there wouldn't be a game.
It's a little bit hard to die in the Aeluqygwen as well, because if the implement of the spirit world and actually being able to play your character as a ghost essentially gives you more opportunities. You can still level up as you're going along, and you can find ways to come back.
But anyway, the way that played out was that at a fairly low level, it came into a situation where it would have been extremely advantageous to my character to basically try to off most of the rest of the party. Try to secure the ally in the party that he could secure, and then try and kill off everyone else. And it would have been the best thing for him to do. It would have been in the best interest of his faction and his goals. But as a player, I had to try and find a reason to roleplay around that. And the reason that I found ended up being like a driving part of how my character was played and his goal for most of the campaign. But at the time that I was considering it, I definitely like strategized how I would go about trying to kill them. And I knew that they had already done.
These people think I'm wicked.
And I knew that they had already done the same thing.
Sure.
So when it came down to game day and they walked in, I was like,
"Is today gonna be the day?
Is today the day that I'm gonna like fight these guys to the death?"
Or
and when I discussed it with them beforehand, they both basically said that if their PCs died, that they didn't feel like writing new PCs. And I was like, oh, well, that doesn't seem very sporting. The times in game where blows were struck between characters did not go well. The first time that it happened, it involved one of the characters having a seriously emotional. Not one of the characters, one of the players having an extremely emotional moment. The session ended.
That's true.
Someone was ejected from the household.
That was the trouble player we were talking about. X Potions just had a video. That was the screaming match.
Drama.
I haven't had a problem like that since he's left the party. Actually,
I will also say, as far as like relishing D&D combat, there were times when Barney had friends of ours come and play NPCs.
That's me, by the way.
Oh yeah, he's Barney.
Or Barnes, whatever.
So
Michael.
So yeah, like we would have friends come and play NPCs, and oftentimes those NPCs would be in a position to fight us, or get one over on us in some way or another. And a couple of us got the distinction of killing the NPCs played by our one particularly nefarious friend. Yeah, he's good.
He's a great role player.
He writes some pretty excellent NPCs. They were enjoyable as rivals,
just a great role player.
As rivals and as challenges, but also as allies when those situations arose. But like there was like it was extremely satisfying to see the look on his face when I defeated one of his NPCs. because the NPC that he wrote was like a few levels higher than my character was. He was written.
Sure.
He was not written to be defeated by my character.
No.
And the way that he entered into the campaign, it was in the interest of my character to do something about his mission and stop him.
His agenda, all right.
Yeah, so when you have somebody that's written a character and they've put work into trying to make the character badass, and you've put work into trying to make your character badass, when you fight, it's intense. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good dice rolling experience.
So you say you enjoy the player versus player experience.
I do.
All right. So one thing I want to clear everything up.
If somebody killed one of my characters, I wouldn't have any hard feelings about it.
One of the things I want to clear up is I don't allow broken stuff, and I pretty much like have found ways to eliminate broken stuff in the game. Yeah, go get that one. I have more knocks at the door. So
popular.
The way I do that is through factions and other social political protocol for the characters. But I have to get into another vid. And lastly, I want to talk about what it was all about, what the story was all about, and what was the main plot lines all about. I wanted the story to be about a love affair, forbidden love affairs, the social impulse of love and how love knows no bounds. I wanted to have it like as an underlying feature of the whole campaign. And some people find it hard to bring love stories into campaigns or to role playing games. I think I'm good at it. I'm not sure. I've pulled it off a few times, I know. Um, but uh, I don't know whether I'm really successful or not.
Can I offer an opinion here?
Sure, you can, buddy.
I think that romance is something, as far as like classical drama is concerned, that is challenging to portray well as a player and challenging as a DM to present to the players in an engaging way. And it's something that requires a good rapport between the players, I think. But ultimately, it serves to make any story better. And I think that that's really a big part of what D&D is about, is a good story.
Well, let's talk about your character's personal affairs in the first campaign.
Whoa, baby!
Where are you going? Theo Bancroft. He had a family for a long time, correct? And
He had 8 kids.
to druids, family is very important in this world. It's the most sacred thing to them, and that's because it's their creation from the Earth, or their closest bond to the Earth is through their family.
It's a miracle that everyone can do.
It's a miracle everyone can
If you
do.
think about it that way.
And so he opted to smoke out of scale, out of frame there. Open a window. He opted to keep your family, but they didn't play a major role in the campaign game. Pay attention.
Yes, I was paying.
Your family didn't really play a major role in the campaign.
They didn't come into the role playing very much.
No.
At one point, many of them were killed
by
an evil wizard.
Let's talk about
It was sad.
Really your love story got cut short.
Actually, particularly gruesome and
The
tragic.
crescendo of your love story, I guess. The climax happened when?
Which was definitely an extramarital thing.
It was an extramarital thing, and it was actually your true love, but you didn't know when or where it was going to come or how long you were going to have to wait. And he went for it. He basically, it was an aspect of the divine plane itself. And
I found it interesting that Barney was able to anticipate that I would definitely go for that. I felt that when it came to power grabbing in the party, that my character had the most hands-off approach.
Definitely.
And that I didn't go for power grabs when I could have. I would give them to other players or not contest for them with other players. And in that particular scenario, I felt like it was time for me to go for something. I felt like I was in a position to do it, and the way that Barney was presenting the scenario, I felt like the best way to roleplay it was to go for it.
Now, it ended up being very character changing for your character. I mean, he pretty much dropped off the face of the earth and went and fell in love at that moment. Even
he disengaged from a major combat.
From a major combat with the MacGuffin item of the campaign.
After role-playing like one of the maybe 3 or 4 romance scenes of the campaign, which was hilarious because I decided to role-play the character as kind of like a badass Rasta dude for that session, which made it extra funny, I think.
I don't know, you over role-played that a couple of times. The voice was killing us for a while.
It was on purpose.
It was kind of hard to communicate. So yeah, I wanted it to be about everyday emotions, primarily love, because I feel like love motivates people to a great deal, and just everyday mundane things and how they affect interpersonal relationships with people, or how they affect small group dynamics, or how they affect the relationships between factions, or royal houses, or noble houses, or any organized group of people. And
Romance definitely came into the story more for some characters than others.
sure, sure. Um, with the Spirit of Man, I kind of introduced a concept that the story is going to revolve around these couple characters, and everything else isn't minimized. I don't think.
No.
Um, it's just that they're they're playing a character in a main story rather than the main character in the story. I guess.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're not
right.
important.
I like the way you said that. That was well worded.
Thanks. But hopefully I'll get some more Aeluqygwen videos up and I can explain the world a little bit more to you guys before we start broadcasting sessions. We did play a little bit last night, some prequel type stuff, zero level type gaming sessions.
I like my new character a lot.
You can talk about it if you want, or you want to save that for another time. We'll save it for another time. It's been a long video. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching.